call the member for Holt.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise in terms of discussing the appropriations debate to talk about, in particular, the residents of my constituency, which is Holt. And particularly I notice that there's an appropriation with respect to flooding. But I just wanted to talk about my particular experience with flooding and the incredible resilience of the community that I represent. The community that I represent gets some pretty interesting press. There's a young fella, Corey, I think his name was, and he ran a house party and got a bit of attention. And there's a television series that basically has a couple of characters around Fountain Lakes, but in actual fact Fountain Gate Shopping Centre. And I think if you were surveying my constituents about how they felt about being portrayed in that sort of light, I think you would find a very interesting response. Let's say I don't think it'd be selling many copies at the Fountain Gate JB Hi-Fi or Fountain Gate Dick Smith shop. But I want to talk about, as I said, the resilience of my community, not in the way in which it gets conveniently portrayed in the national media, but the actual courage, their tenacity, and just particularly when they come together in this enormous community spirit which I think epitomises my area, and particularly with respect to flooding, which has occurred substantially in my electorate. On Friday the 4th and Saturday the 5th of February, several suburbs in Holt, my electorate, including Narre Warren, Narre South, Lyndhurst, portions of Berwick, Hampton Park and Cranbourne North, were amongst Melbourne's worst affected by a rare storm event caused by the tail of Cyclone Yasi. At Lyndhurst, which is in my electorate, basically more than 188 millimetres of rain fell within a 24-hour period. Now, the deluge was such an extraordinary and extreme event that, according to a preliminary assessment by Melbourne Water, it was described as a 1 in 500-year event rather than a 1 in 100-year event. There's no doubt, obviously, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this summer has been defined by natural disasters and national tragedy. It's very difficult to forget the images of cars flowing down the streets in Toowoomba and to hear about the incredible heart-rending stories of those that were lost and those that were saved. But what I also want to talk about, as I said, in terms of the flooding that occurred within my electorate, was the incredible community spirit that they displayed. And in terms of the flooding, the volunteers and residents in my local community helped those in need when those severe storms hit our community. Now, it's not been written about much, but the floods caused enormous damage to our community. However, as I've said, it's amazing to see the community spirit of the people in the flood-affected areas like Narre Warren and Hampton Park, neighbours helping others in need, even when they had been flooded themselves. And as I said, the floods weren't as in the same scale of Queensland, but let me say it affected 145 households, 10 aged care facilities and senior citizens facilities, and 364 businesses. It impacted on local schools, local sporting facilities, parks, roads and community facilities. Some homes in Holt still remain uninhabitable or unsafe to live in. Many roads, footpaths and fences are damaged. Now, the terrifying nature and the rapidity of the events that occurred resulted in some of my constituents being trapped in cars or homes, not knowing when the rain was going to stop. And that was obviously an incredibly traumatic experience for everybody. And I'll talk about how that was actually relayed by the social media a bit later on in this speech. I'm certainly most proud of the volunteers and the residents in my community. As I said, without question, they came to the aid of others in need even when they'd been flooded themselves. For example, one of my constituents, Joan Crilly from Hampton Park, who was particularly affected due to the storm damage, and particularly because of a stormwater drain that was in the front of her house, was actually stunned. She'd actually been called and basically told that there was flooding in her street. So she drove down to her street and couldn't actually get terribly far because a lot of it was underwater. So she wandered into the house and waded through the water to get into her house, and basically the water was flooding through her property. But the amazing thing was that what occurred was that people, even in the midst of this fairly treacherous situation, could see that there was a stormwater drain that was actually blocked. So you had these people materialising out of nowhere, even though their homes had been flooded, trying to rip the tops off the stormwater drain so that the water could actually get through. and it just epitomised the spirit of the people of Hampden Park. You were reading on Facebook, for example, where you had people whose homes had been flooded that were walking into their neighbours' homes to help clear out the flooding and to assess the level of flooding damage. As I said, a very, very rare community spirit, and something that epitomises, I think, the quality of the people that live in Hampden Park. And I can't go without talking about, particularly in this speech, the efforts of the Narre Warren SES unit, which was one of the busiest in the States on that weekend when the storm hit. They received 684 calls for assistance just in that weekend alone. And with the help of local CFA branches, the Narre Warren SES unit rescued dozens of people from flooded cars and assisted with evacuation of an entire retirement centre. The SES was always and has been active in handing out information about what to do in emergency situations, and this certainly came in handy both before and afterwards. In particular, the efforts of Narre Warren Unit Coordinator Tim Howell and his dedicated team of volunteers was incredible. And I know that many of these volunteers worked throughout the night, responding to dozens of calls of assistance from residents, private nursing homes and many other businesses. And as I said, we as a community are incredibly indebted to those that they assisted. I'd also know, talking to you about this issue of Facebook and social media, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm sure that you would have seen that, obviously being on Facebook yourself, that Facebook's a pretty valuable tool for communication. Excuse me, never more so when you have a situation where your community is being flooded. And one of the most extraordinary things that I found was going home. I live in Endeavour Hills, not far away from a lot of where the severe flooding occurred, and then instantaneously getting updates about how severe the flooding was in suburbs like Hampden Park and Pits of Cranbourne, Narre Warren. It's an amazing medium, particularly when it's used like that, and as I said, sort of brings the community together almost in a global village. So it's fantastic as a local federal member of parliament to see people that I was connected to via the Facebook actually communicating what was occurring there. And some of that information was actually being accessed by emergency services as well. It was amazing seeing the YouTube clips of the Hampden Park shopping centre, where the rivers were basically running through the shopping centre in a flood towards the roads. So it's an incredible tool that's being used, and particularly, I think, a valuable tool. We've seen its value overseas through Twitter and Facebook, but it also is incredibly useful in situations like floods, which occurred particularly in the region around Hampden Park. But there's one particular person I wanted to acknowledge with respect to that, who was Michelle Holsall, who is an established and valued member of the Hampden Park community. And what she did specifically was created the own Hampden Park Floods Facebook page, or Casey Floods Facebook page. And what that did was allow people just to instantaneously hook on, whether or not they were Facebook friends or not, so that they could actually communicate and actually see what was occurring. But what also occurred, and I think what was quite extraordinary, was following the sort of scenes of devastation, we go back to what was occurring in Queensland, a local Casey Cares flood benefits concert was organised for February the 12th. Now, the organising committee of the flood benefit concert was led by Casey Deputy Mayor Wayne Smith, who is a person that's obviously a councillor for the ward and someone that's deeply committed to his community. He formed a committee. Now, this group of people symbolised the charitable and generous nature, as I've said to you before, on the residents of Holt. Inspired by the heart-wrenching scenes of the devastation in Queensland and northern Victoria, the group set about raising much-needed funds by organising a special benefit concert. Ironically, the committee had no idea that our community would be directed by flooding or affected by flooding, which is what actually occurred. And ironically, the venue that was chosen to stage the event, the fundraising event, was itself flooded. Now, this did not dampen the spirits of the committee and the 100 performers that volunteered to participate in the concert. The concert was moved to the Cranbourne Community Theatre. I'm proud of the fact that not even a flooded venue could stop our local community from banding together in support of flood victims across the country. To be in attendance at the concert, which was run on the evening of February the 12th, was a great honour. And I was also extremely proud that more than $7,000 was raised at this sold-out venue. This included the $1,000 donation presented to the Mayor on the night of the concert by the Hampden Park Progress Association. In addition, $12,000 was also donated to support the victims of the Victorian and Queensland floods by the City of Casey and I wish to acknowledge the Council for this contribution. I'm also, particularly during that evening, in awe of Holt's homegrown talent. Performers like Madison Pritchett, Andrew Swift, the Casey Choir and many others were truly amazing and showed that the arts are alive and well in Holt. The solo number delivered by Chelsea Wall deserves particular mention. Her home was badly damaged by knee-deep floodwater. Nevertheless, she continued to go to rehearsals and participate. To have such a high standard of artistic talent, professional dedication on show, again, made me particularly proud to be the local federal member. And in speaking about that, I wanted to turn my attention to recognising two important events that occurred within the Holt electorate. And one was the Community Spirit and Leadership Awards, which was held on the 8th of December, in which 41 students from schools across the area were recognised at an award ceremony held at the Casey Council Chamber. Now, this award ceremony was attended by over 250 people, including parents, teachers and supporters. The awards recognised the outstanding contribution made by the students and the difference that their contribution, their hard work and their dedication have made in their schools and in our local community. The testimonials from the schools nominating the students were truly outstanding and tell of the great work done by our kids and the strong sense of community spirit that they have. One of the award recipients helped plan and organise a fundraiser for a fellow student with a disability, which raised $13,000 towards essential walking equipment. Another recipient had helped rescue a 4-year-old boy who had fallen into a public swimming pool, even though she herself wasn't a very good swimmer. She went to the bottom of the pool and pulled the boy to safety. There were many other similarly impressive testimonials, ranging from organising fundraisers for a less fortunate family whose house had burnt down to collecting food each day for school breakfasts. Importantly, this award ceremony gave me the chance to say thanks to these students on behalf of the community and to let them know how proud we are of them. And if I can, I'm going to read through their names because I think they deserve to be acknowledged. So, I'd like to acknowledge these very impressive young Holt constituents. There's Moshe Attard, Lexi Harris, Carissa Nettleton, Dana Nicholson-Bowie, Naeem Ree, Daniel Cooper, Shona Davenport-Stylo, Joel Shaw, Dean Kemp, Jean-Pierre Hanna, Renisha Simianic, Nathan Usher, Zoe Flight, Natalie Wickens, Joshua Strawn, Molisi Tuinove, Phoebe Grothius, Oleg Glazanov, Stacey Beach, Daniel Lando, Sophie Weichman, Shona Morrison, Madeline Nelson, Navina Jurek, Joe Stouffer, Jessica Schuyler, Jamie Rundle, Samantha Herholt, Sam Crotty, Jessie Camentini, Molly McLean, Mitchell Dunn, Isabella Zaguris, Emma Seal, Daniel Markison, Karina McNeely, Douglas Diaz, Timothy Riley, Daniel Martin, Olivia Permal, Sitara Mohammadi, Bridget Bagija, Dylan Cavalot, Joshua Dodson. Now, there are a lot of names there, but basically they deserve to be acknowledged because of the contribution they made to our community. As I said at the start of my presentation, on a national level, the community does get some pretty bad PR, but it would be pretty good sometimes if the national media actually paid attention to the quality of the young people that we actually have in our community. And it was amazing when we actually conducted the Holt Australia Day Awards at Hampton Park on Australia Day and also in Doveton. There are a couple of young people in particular that I wanted to sort of mention, if I can actually find their names here, amongst the large number of people that received an award. And it was very, very ironic that we held the Hampton Park Community Spirit Awards actually in the Hampton Park Reserve, which effectively was underwater as a consequence of the flooding not too down the track on February the 4th and the 5th. But in particular, there was a young man called Anthony Bickman who bravely rushed into a burning house to help a woman and her daughter and rescued her and brought them to safety. As I said to you, Holt is a growth-built area. There are a lot of young families that come here to basically create and to live the Australian dream. They bring their families out here. They're trying to create prosperity for not just their family, but their children and their children's children as well. It's a great honour to represent this constituency. When you hear the stories of their courage, their commitment, their resilience and the contribution they make, Holt is the best electorate in Australia.